Let's talk a bit about debt, which is something that we all try not to have, but inevitably we all do, even if it's just the mortgage on the house. But most people owe something to someone. How can you use debt?
Debt is really important because most people think that they spend what they earn, but the reality is that generally we spend more or less. That is, we're either going into debt, going into more debt as we live, or we're reducing our debt and saving money. And so generally, it's very few people that just break even. They're not going into more debt or less debt. And so it's a really fundamental question. And if you look through Scripture, it doesn't talk about debt in a positive light at all. It's basically saying that if you're in debt, try and get out of it as soon as possible. The borrower is servant to the lender. And so when I went down this journey about working out how much debt to have and whether we should use debt at all, if you look at the likes of Spurgeon and some other great theologians, they actually said that debt was a sin, we should never get into it. And that's not a bad approach to take. But if you look at Scripture, it doesn't say that debt's a sin. It is actually just good not to be in it too much and to get out of it as soon as you possibly can. So then the key is then, if debt isn't a sin, then the question for us as individuals, how much debt do we allow ourselves to have, and then what do we use it for? Do we use it for just the family home, or do we use it for consumables? Do we use credit cards? Do we have overhanging credit card balances? And so it's a really fundamental question because it really has a long-term impact on how you live your life. Classic example is that, do you wait on God to provide for you for a particular item or thing that you're trying to save towards, or do I just put it on the credit card and take control myself? And so that's a big question and sometimes I think we need to use the card, but often I think we err on the side of not waiting on God for the purchase to be enabled in another way.
It's very easy, the card, isn't it? It's just, particularly now with the PayPass, you just hold your card up and ping, it's gone.
Without even thinking about it. Yeah, it's incredible.
Is it realistic these days to not be in debt?
Particularly with Australian property price, it is very difficult, particularly for first homeowners, to get into the market without debt. I've met a few couples over the years. I used to do marriage preparation courses, and there was one couple in that course who were just about to get married. They'd both been, I think, owned a home, and within about 18 months of marriage they were going to be out of debt. But it's very rare for that sort of thing to happen these days, and often you need to use debt at least for the family home. But I guess one thing that you need to consider, particularly early on, is what are you going to use debt for? There's no real specifics from a biblical perspective, but you can put some fundamentals in place, like only borrow for things that are going to go up in value. Don't take out so much debt or have so much debt that it's going to put undue stress on the family. And relating to that, the third one is having sufficient equity or in the thing that you're borrowing, so that if it does go down in value, that you're not going to be owing something. So the classic thing there is, if you buy a house for $500,000 and you borrow all of it, and then it goes down in value to $400,000, then afterwards you're going to owe the bank still $100,000. Whereas if you had a 20% deposit or $100,000 to start with, and then it went down in value, then if you needed to sell, you wouldn't be having an outstanding debt. So there's a few debt principles that I guess you can potentially think about whether you want to adopt those into the future.